All right, let's shift over to the White House where something extraordinary just happened. You've got the leader of South Africa. Now, what's been happening in South Africa is post-apartheid, it seems very much like the shoe's now on the other foot, and they're perfectly happy to discriminate against the 8% of South African citizens who are white. And to be honest, it looks like they're enjoying discriminating against these 8% white, sins of the father and so on. That's their justification. So now Trump has let it's 59 South African white farmers and their families come to the United States saying that they're refugees fleeing persecution, and he's used the term genocide. And we've been doing our own research to find out what exactly is happening in South Africa because unlike Jake Tapper, we don't just take the word of the president, sorry, Jake, but the left, I should say, left-wing reporters. We actually started kicking these claims and trying to figure out whether they were true. And we can't support genocide so far based on what we've seen, but there is 100% threatened violence, and there has been some violence against farmers, though they don't distinguish in the numbers that they release when it comes to race. So there's no way that we have been able to figure out of knowing exactly who's died. What we know is the following, and I'm going to get to what's happening at the White House. I'm just giving the audience some background. Overall, there is consensus that there's some violence occurring against white farmers in South Africa. It is disputed just how much and how big a problem this is. Via the nonprofit AfriForum, which is a South African land forum that focuses on the interest of Afrikaners, they said in 2022, there were verified 333 attacks on South African farms, including 50 murders. The year before that, 415 attacks, 55 murders, but they're not broken down by race. However, we do know that whites in South Africa own about 3/4 of the farms. So if you're seeing all this violence on farms and you know that whites own 3/4 of the farms, the odds are good that a lot of whites are being killed, or at least were in 2021 and 2022. Via the Federalist in 2024, April through September, citing South African police stats, there were 197 reported farm murders and 154 attempts and nearly 600 total cases of assaults on farms. Okay, so all of that is pretty good evidence that there are white farmers being killed or attempted murders on those white farmers. FYI, the UN defines genocide under the Article 2 of the Convention as a crime committed with the intent to destroy a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group in whole or in part, So it's open to interpretation. And so what happened now is the South African president, Ramaphosa, shows up to the White House because they have deals they want to negotiate. We're mad that they turned in Israel to The Hague for war crimes in Gaza, and they would like to do more business with us. But we are also saying we're not going to have economic meetings and summits in South Africa because you're doing this, and we object to it. So this was an attempted, reconciliation of sorts when this guy comes over here and sits down with President Trump in the Oval. Okay, now here comes today's developments. President Trump now reporting here from the New York Times, staged a video screening in the Oval showing some kind of documentary that purportedly shows violence against white farmers in South Africa. The delegation from South Africa, sitting in silence, watching, looking somewhat bemused and perplexed, according to the Times. They write, "This is an extraordinary scene. The Trump team clearly came to the meeting prepared to play videos, backing up what the Times describes as their false claim that there are mass killings against white South Africans." As an aside, the Times is very upset, as is most of the left wing, that Trump has given refugee status to these 59 white South African citizens. They are convinced it's because they have white skin. Suddenly they're very concerned about refugees coming into the United States, not the 3 million that Biden allowed, but the 59 that Trump allowed because they're white. And before I show you what happened today at the Oval, let me show you just a little bit of how the New York Times has been covering this ongoing problem and their take on it. We're going to play, it's a little on the long side, but let's play 11C from their New York Times podcast, The Daily, which aired on Monday.
For decades, white South Africans ruled with an iron fist, overseeing the country's cruel system of racial oppression. So why is President Trump now welcoming them to the U.S. as victims? Today, John Eligo on how the MAGA movement became obsessed with Afrikaners.
And if you think about
Obsessed.
it, this is the perfect thing to capture Trump's eye. Because if we look at his ascendancy to the presidency, part of his whole pitch was to be this president who would ensure that the forgotten white man would be taken care of, right? That we would fight back against sort of this demographic shift, these demographic changes, these brown people coming into our country and invading our borders. Trump's presidency and his whole political identity has always had an element that has really spoken to the folks all around the world who embrace these sort of theories, these feelings that white people are under threat. And so here he had an example. South Africa could now be the example that he points to and says, like, this is what could come for us here in America.
And how much has it been about circumstances within the United States? The perceived threat level against white citizens here? In other words, is this about the tale of the Afrikaners or that cautionary tale that Trump and those around him feel it represents to white Americans?
Okay. So you get the flavor, Victor. They're upset that the refugees are white. That's not allowed. Your thoughts on it before I take you to Inside the Oval and some more of what we heard.
Well, one thing we did know is they applied for refugee status before they got here, and they were granted that. We know that the first thing Joe Biden did was say that refugees who came to the United States could declare, I shouldn't say refugees, anybody who came to the United States could declare they were refugees after they got here. And they got rid of the idea that under the first Trump administration, you had to apply for refugee status in your home country. So first of all, what they're basically saying is, and this is a racist thing, what they're saying is, if Donald Trump has people who apply for refugee status and he allows them in, say 60-something, 70, maybe even get to 100, and they happen to be white, that's proof of racism. But if we let in 10 million people and maybe 3 million have applied for refugee status after they got here, and we let them in, and the vast majority are not white, that's okay, but we can't make these people apply in their own country and they're under 100. And so what I'm getting at is the left it opens another issue very quickly, Megyn, and that is people are using the word white in kind of a racist context I haven't seen in recent times. And I'll give you just a few examples. We had Caitlin Clark in the Foul the other day, and she was called a white gal. And then we had Jasmine Crockett talk about she didn't trust the Democrats not to nominate white boys. And then we had Ilhan Omar, a tape surface where she called basically white men the greatest terrorist threat. And so the left has taken this idea, and we saw it with Milley and Austin, said white privilege, white rage, white supremacy, we're going to ferret out in the Pentagon. They found by the way, that Pentagon report that finally surfaced found no such systemic white racism in the military, but it did account for 45,000 people not joining the military, and the data shows that they were overwhelmingly white males who felt under the DEI, they were under suspicion unjustifiably. And by the way, they were the demographic that died at double their numbers in the general population in Afghanistan and Iraq. So we just basically alienated them, and then when we got rid of DEI, they came back. So it's been the bar, like everything else with the left, the bar has been lowered, and you can just now say that Donald Trump is a white racist. If that were true, there was a Rasmussen report, as you know, came out 2 weeks ago about the first 100 days. And what was interesting about that was 39% of African Americans said they approved of the first 100 days. 62% of Hispanics said they did. And they were much higher than whites. And so if Donald Trump is a racist and he's favoring white immigrants as refugees, why in the world are people of color supporting him far more than any other Republican candidate in modern memory? And I think what we're seeing is that the Democratic Party and the left realizes that their boutique issues, transgenderism, open borders, no deportations,
DEI.
basically DEI, pro-Hamas, appeals to nobody. And they are a party of the very, very wealthy bi-coastal elite and the subsidized poor. But my point is, African Americans and Hispanics are starting to look at a Jasmine Crockett or an AOC in the same way working white people look at the architects, a Senator Holland or a Nancy Pelosi. They don't feel connected with them.
This July, there is a global summit of BRICS nations in Rio de Janeiro. The bloc of emerging superpowers, including China, Russia, India, and Iran, are meeting with the goal of displacing the U.S. dollar as the global currency. They're calling this the Rio Reset. As BRICS nations push forward with their plans, some worry global demand for U.S. dollars will decrease, bringing down the value of the dollars in your savings. While this transition, if it happens, would not happen overnight, the Rio Reset could mark a pivotal moment. So learn if diversifying your savings into gold is right for you. Birch Gold Group can help you move your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. Claim your free info kit on gold by texting MK to the number 989898. With an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no-obligation info kit on owning gold before July and the Rio Reset. Text MK to the number 989898 today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.